I cannot express how happy I am. I'm feeling so good. I am finally home in my own space. Like, it's so nice to have space and my own things that like I don't have to worry about like keeping out of the way of others, like, and like moving around other people's lifestyles, and like this home is beautiful, and I love it, and I'm just so happy to finally be home. I got my bed in the background. I'm not going to show you my room because I don't feel like it, but I did take a few pictures once I set it up because it was just so nice to be able to be like, this is my stuff and my things and my space, and it's mine, and it feels very nice. And this house is so calm and so peaceful and so clean, and oh my goodness, it's been so long since I've been in a space like that. That's not true, because the place that I was just working at doing caregiving was very nicely kept that way. It was a nice, clean, safe space, but it was somebody else's space, right? And so it was actually incredibly, like, I enjoyed very much keeping things up to that person's standards. I kept the place the way that they had showed me that they like it kept. And so when they came back, they were like, this place is cleaner than it's ever been. And I was like, no, this is how you showed me how you like it. You know, I think that maybe it was in bits and pieces and they had never really seen everything come together that way. But at the same time, like, no, it was as if they had never left as far as that was concerned. And that made me very happy. And like, it was a very, very nice space. And the way that she kept it was the way that like I would keep things in that same sort of space. So like, it was easy for me to get into that, and it was so nice. And like, it's been so long since I've been in a space like that. When I lived with my ex, despite all of the toxicity of the relationship between us, he's a bit OCD, so he keeps things particular, very particular. I love that, and that is why I enjoyed living with him for so long. The dude was trying to kill me multiple times, and I still was like, tried to live other places, and was like, oh my god, I would still rather live with somebody that's trying to kill me but can keep a clean house than the alternative, which it probably says a lot about me. But like, I grew up in such, like, not that my mom was dirty, our place wasn't filthy, my space was. I kept my stuff filthy. But like, my mom was the one that like took care of everything. We didn't really learn how to clean or take care of ourselves properly because she just did that. And like, she wasn't like great at it, but she was more than that. Like, it wasn't about the cleanliness that way, really. There's always dogs in the house and stuff like that. It was just a lived-in home, but like, it wasn't super messy or anything like that. It was just that she's kind of like a pack rat. And like, as an artist, like, she's always like collecting random things that she finds, and it's like, oh, well, it could potentially become art at some point. So it's just like all this random stuff. And then she has like a whole bunch of stuff that's like been given to her over the years that she's kept, that's like super sentimental to her, that like doesn't go anywhere in particular, and like doesn't go with anything. And like, the whole house just kind of had this weird chaotic feel because of that. I think largely in part just because of the people in the home. But I digress. Just different styles where like, I like things like, I like earthy, natural things. I like having lots of plants. Like, I would prefer I have my plants right here. And they had a hard time in the car today. It was very, very hot in the car, and I had them in the car for like 2 hours without any air, and they are mad. So they're drinking and getting comfortable. They're also mad that we moved again, because I thought we were moving yesterday, and instead we just went to a different hotel. So I'm assuring them that this is our home now, and the young ones seem excited, but especially a couple of these older folks are just like, these ones came back. This guy's coming back fine with a little bit of water. This side of him is pissed. It's just going to take some time. I've been talking to them all day, and they're just annoyed with me because they're like, we already heard it, bitch. You already told us that we were going to be home. And then you put us back in that car. We're not going back in the car. You're not going back in the car. oh God, you're not going back in the car. We're set. We're going to figure things out. Things are better now. My life is moving in a better direction. I'm claiming that shit. Because I worked way too hard to let us get back into any of the other positions we are. And I'm not scared of the same things and stuff like that anymore. And like, it just ain't the same. Just ain't the same. Man, so nice being in this space. I like things to like be. It was funny because like the girl, when I was living with this one girl, like her kids, her one daughter was probably like, how old is she? Like 9 to 11. I can't remember how old she was. She seemed older than she was, I think, but like I can't remember how old she was. I don't even know if she was that old, to be honest. Kids are wild these days, but she was like, oh, it's aesthetic. Like, oh, you like things being aesthetic. When I first moved in there for like 2 weeks, I had paid for the room to be my own room. But then her sister moved in with her kids, and there were just so many kids in the house that like they needed space to be able to play and to be able to do things. And like at first, her sister's daughter was staying in my room with me, and like we made the space like a little art space for her. But then like the other kids just kind of like took over too, which was unfortunate for her because I really kind of wanted her to be able to have her own space. But granted, I had the room maybe for like a week, really. That was where like I had paid for it and to be my space, but then it just like turned into this space for the kids, which was whatever. I really didn't even think twice about it at the time. I was happy just to make sure that the kids were happy. And but it was funny because like the way I had cleaned it, like the room was trashed when I first moved in there. There was just so much stuff, and like the girl that had let me stay there like let me move in prior to like preparing for somebody to move in. I just needed a place to stay, so she let me come in early. So like I didn't think twice about that either, right? And I was just like, if you don't mind me cleaning this stuff, like I don't have a problem cleaning it at all. So I moved pretty much everything that was in the room into the closet, which like everything was just kind of all over the place. So it wasn't like a big deal or whatever for it to go into the closet. But then I cleaned stuff and I kind of set my stuff up, and like I learned from that ex to set things up like everything like has a place and everything's like in a straight line, and like everything looks very like neat and clean and nice. And so it was funny because like the daughter came in and she's like, oh, this is so aesthetic. She kept saying aesthetic, but like that is what it is. I did learn that from my ex too. Like everything in his house was themed. It was like a nautical sort of theme. So like anything, like it was also colored. Like it was like navy blue, like a sky blue, white, burgundy, and then like this stone color, like a dark stone color for the wood and stuff like that. And like everything went with itself generally. And that's just how he did things. And like, it made it such a nice feeling space. Like when you put that time and energy and like consideration into your things, like it does feel like those things are cared for a certain way. And that's a nice feeling. So like, I always loved living with him for that. I loved it. I loved the way he kept his house, and I loved keeping his house the way he liked it. I loved doing like he was so weird with his laundry. He wanted like everything like color coded and coded according to like sleeve length and stuff like that. You know, like he had tank tops and then t-shirts and then long sleeve shirts and then sweaters. And then like all of the stuff that he collected and everything like that. Everything had a space and like a specific way that he wanted it to be presented. And like at any point in time he could go and like you could see everything and you could get everything, and it all looked very, very nice. And like I didn't have those standards when I first moved in with him, but he was not going to let me live there if I didn't keep up to his standards, sort of deal, right? And it wasn't hard for me to fall into that as a partner. Like that's kind of my tendency anyways, and I found myself greatly enjoying it. And that's something that I like learned about myself and have gained from that relationship. So now like I carry that with me, where like I have a different taste. I like my things still look similarly to they did when I was first married, when I first moved out of my parents' house for the first time. I like warm, earth tones, and I like lots of natural stuff. I like everything to be like natural wood and lots of plants, and like I like splashes of color, but I mostly like greens and olive greens and oranges and brown. It's like my go-to, and black. I think my roommate's home. Yeah. So it's nice. It's nice being able to have my own space and having things like be the way I would have them. I do not have to think twice about it. It's kind of crazy because it's just been so long. The last time I had my own space like this was in 2020. And at the beginning of 2021, I lost that space, like when everything with COVID was happening. I'm going to pause this. I'll be back. So it was like when things started getting really intense during COVID, like when there was like a bunch of lockdowns and stuff like that, my landlord started kicking people out, which I'm pretty sure was illegal at the time. And I brought it up to her, but like I wasn't going to sit there and fight her about it. And I had already kind of had to fight to get the stimulus because it was not the first one that came, and I don't believe it was the second one that came. I believe we got 3 of them, and I think it was the third one. It was whatever the last one was. And I hadn't gotten the initial one, and I believe the initial 2. I think there was 3. Because my ex had claimed me as a dependent, even though I wasn't a dependent. There was 6 months that I was I had knee surgery, and I was out of work for 2 months, and then I was in rehab for like 3 months after that. So there was like almost like a whole 6-month period that I was like not consistently working, but I also was like had set myself up. Like it wasn't like I was just living off of him during that time, and then I was paying stuff after that. So like it wasn't like he was taking care of me that entire time. I definitely wasn't his dependent. But he claimed that, and it made it so that I couldn't get a different one of them, and I had to like fight to like prove that I wasn't his dependent in order to get access to get the stimulus, which was like whatever. I mean, I didn't really want the government's money anyways, but I did receive the last round of stimulus, and I used that to go to California in 2019 and going into 2020 prior to my surgery, my knee surgery. My best friend had kind of not convinced me. It's not like it took much convincing, but like encouraged me to potentially pursue a career in comedy. I wasn't career oriented at all at that time, and he was like, "Okay, well you're about 30 now, and like you're still kind of just living this weird way, and like maybe you could consider getting a career. Like you don't have to have a traditional career. You don't have to like do what everybody else is doing, but like did you know that like maybe you could be a comedian?" And he had gotten into this podcast that had comedians, and you know it was people that were making it big that way, and so he got me into that. And I ended up like, that's what was crazy about it, because then like once when I was like down from my surgery, there was like that 2 months where like I was just bedridden. So like I started doing a lot more comedy during that point, like online, and started networking really hard. And from that point, I like started moving in the direction of comedy, and taking it more and more seriously, so that by the time it was like mid 2020, I think it was like April or so, that I moved out of my ex's house and into my own space. He started acting crazy like he always did every time I left. Would like show up at the house and like bang on the door and stuff, which meanwhile it was like I was renting a room in a house where like there were other people living there, and he was being crazy. So I didn't feel the safest there, especially because then he told me that he had put a hit on me. He was like making jokes about it, about having put a hit on me. And then a girl like, okay, this is just like a wild story, but like then there was one day that I happened to be home from work, And so I was going to take my dogs for a walk, and it was around like 10, 11 o'clock in the morning. I was going to take my dogs earlier, but instead I started smoking pot and just kind of like procrastinating. And was just kind of like taking it easy because it was my day off. But my plan was to take the girls for a walk. And literally, like, I was about to, I think I was like going to close my windows to leave, either close or open them to leave, to take my dogs for a walk. And I heard one of my neighbors running down the street yelling. And I was like, normally I don't try to get into people's business, but this was like real chaotic right away. And I looked and I was like listening to what they were saying, and they were like telling the neighbor across the street that a girl just up the block had gotten, like, a random dude just came up and threw oil on her and lit her on fire while she was walking her dogs. She was walking her 2 dogs, and this random guy just came up and lit her on fire. And then he ran off. So, like, that's what the person was yelling about, was like, because that guy's still out there somewhere. And that was crazy to me. And then, like, when I like told my ex, like, brought it up, or I told him about it, and he was like, oh yeah, he was like, I actually know that girl. I used to go to school with her, and he was like making jokes about it and stuff, like, you know. And then, like, what I saw on the paper, at least, or like, well, it was on the internet, for like Waukesha News or whatever, was that the dude had claimed to have gotten paid, like he was on drugs. I think he was on meth and maybe PCP, and he had gotten paid like $30 or something. Not a lot of money, but he had gotten paid to do it so that he could have money for drugs, right? And he was just like some, you know, practically homeless dude in and out of jail all the time anyways, so like he didn't have a problem with it. He did it. But he wasn't even sure if it was the right person. He just was told around what time and what area, and that it was a girl walking her dogs. So he went and did it, and like wasn't even sure if that was, like, he was like, I don't even know that person. Like, I didn't have a personal reason to do it to them. I don't even know if they were the right person. Which I thought was suspicious and crazy. And like the way my ex was talking about it and stuff. And then like when I brought it up to him, like he was like, well, it doesn't just have to be me that put a hit out on you. Like, could have been anybody, referring to the girl that he was constantly sleeping with on and off during our relationship. She was also crazy. She had like 5 kids. So I left for California without telling him. And I basically like was going, my plan was to go to LA and to continue pursuing comedy. I had already made some solid networks with the guys in the podcast that my friend had introduced me to. And was at the time talking about potentially becoming roommates with this one guy, which is so crazy too, because I just saw a clip of him with this other guy whose little brother I was with for a time. Where like they're talking on their podcast. You know, everybody has a podcast nowadays. They're talking on their podcast, and they don't have it anymore. Theirs was funny together, the 2 of them together. But the one dude who I was going to live with, we were talking about being roommates, and he's talking about how he was dating this girl who, like, she at one point was like, well, I could find a better man. Like, it would be easy for me to find somebody else to be with. Like, essentially, like, you're just a dick to me, like, sort of deal. And they were in the shower, or like she was just getting out of the shower, and like when she said that, like it made him very jealous and very angry, so he would like try to choke her out, and then she passed out, and he thought that he had killed her, and he was like crying because he thought that he had killed her, and thankfully she woke up, and then they just went their separate ways. And it was like, this dude's literally admitting to an assault, like much domestic abuse, like on air. And the other guy's like, you know, and I was like, yeah, I'm glad that those things didn't work out. I mean, once I got to LA, like I was planning on meeting him, and he's like, oh, well, actually I'm on my way to Austin right now. Cause he was back and forth all the time at that time. Cause kind of the comedy was moving from where it had been established in LA, was moving out to Austin because Joe Rogan moved to Austin, and these people in the podcast were affiliated with him. So they like started moving out there. And so he was like, you know. So he's like, I have to go to I think it was in the morning. Like by the time I got there, he was planning on going to the airport in the morning to go to Austin. So he didn't have that much time. And like what he was saying was like, well, you could potentially like stay at my place until I get back, because I'm only going to be in Austin for like a week. And we had already been talking about being roommates. So eventually I'd be staying in his space anyways, right? So like he was like, so maybe we can get together and, you know, we can see if that works out. But then he like made it like, but like you're gonna have to sleep with me just so that I know for sure, like, that I can trust you, sort of thing. That isn't how he made it, but like he made it kind of like that. And then when I let him know I wasn't trying to sleep with him right off the bat, then he was like, well, that's the only way you're gonna get anything in this industry, essentially. And like, if you're trying to, like, basically what he had told me at the time, like, just being a dick, was like, you're not going to get anywhere unless you go through me, and this is what I require. And I was like, okay, well, fuck you. I would rather be homeless and figure this out on my own. And that's so wild to me too, because then like things also got crazy, like once I resaw him again in Austin. So that was a wild time, but like my ex didn't know that I was there, and didn't know for like months that I was there. And then at one point in time I'd gone to see the Golden Gate Bridge, but I wasn't trying to like be on it and really see it. I wasn't trying to pay for it. I didn't have any money. I was homeless at the time. And I ended up like driving into a place where like I was stuck in traffic to go onto the Golden Gate Bridge, and I like couldn't turn around, and you had to pay a toll in order to get onto it. And I told them when I came up there, I was like, listen, if I can pull off and get off, I'm not trying to go on the bridge. I don't have the money to pay for this. And they're like, well, you're just gonna have to go through, and they'll send a ticket to your license plate home. And I was like, okay. Well, that home was apparently like my car was still registered or whatever to my ex's space. Like I hadn't re-registered to it to where I was living on my own in Waukesha. So he calls me, and like I haven't talked to him, and I don't know, but he finally contacted me and was like, are you in California? Well, at this point I was already back in Wisconsin, because I was trying to get all of my things out of my storage unit so that I could go back to California, was my plan. That didn't work out. Dude, my timeline has been absolutely crazy. It's been so wild. I've just been through so much, and it was just one thing after another, and having to move to all these different places because of all these different things. And like, I don't think when I was in Texas this past time, I was here for like 7, 8, 9 months, about 9 months, solid, which was great, aside from the fact of everything that was going on in my life at the time because of the person I was caring for. But prior to that, I think I had only been here maybe 7 months. November, December, January, February, March. Like 6 months, maybe. So it's like I've been back and forth a lot. And aside from that, though, because even that was more a sense of stability. I think when I was in Wisconsin, not last year, but the year before last, it was like maybe as early as March or April, but I think it was like May, June until October. May, June, July, August, September, October. 6 months, okay, so it's been like every like 6 to 8 months, I guess. But for a minute there, it was like every couple of months, like, and I really wasn't settled down anywhere. And like when I worked in California and stayed in California, went on the mountain, I was there during the summer, and it was like maybe 4 months, maybe. I think it was like 3 months. And that was paradise, but it also was like all these different things kept leading me in all these different directions. But coming to Texas has always felt like very secure. And like, even though like there hasn't been anything necessarily different to make me feel that way aside from just like the way I feel. Like everything's still been crazy up until recently. And that was like taking that job in Wisconsin for my friend. Like, I was just in Wisconsin working for 3 months. 2 months I was working, but like 3 months with the in-between transition of it. And I was working 24/7. So I was able to, and I saved all of that in order to like get myself into the space that I'm in now. I got a car, I got a space, I got like the things that I needed in order to like not feel like a bum. You know, like a new wardrobe and stuff like that, which I got for extremely cheap. But yeah, it's been years since I've felt set up like this. And like, even when I had been in my other space, so many of my things had been given to me by my ex. And like, it was a big part of like him, like continuing to have some sort of like control over, like, he didn't want to lose me. So like, you know, he got me these different things and stuff like that so that he could kind of hold it against me, like that my space wasn't really mine, because he had like, not that he was paying my rent or my bills, but he had like paid for my bed and my TV and my kitchenware, you know. So like, yeah, I still definitely was not where I'm at now. And as much as I've like always liked to like feel independent, like with my ex, I definitely like I let him take advantage a lot of that. And like, you know, I'm finally in a space where like my stuff is mine, and like I can afford to get the things that I need and cover for the things that I need, and I know how to work for the things that I need in order to like cover for the things I can't afford. And that has taken years of cultivation, and patience and self-care, and I'm just happy to be where I'm at. It's just taken such a long time, and it's so nice. And like, it feels like the kind of thing where like nobody can take this from me. Like, this is secure right now. So like, that's the first time I felt that way. Just because I was afraid even back then. Like, I was afraid of my ex, I was afraid of my family, and I'm just not in that place anymore. So it's nice. It's a very, very nice feeling, especially just after everything I've been through. I would love to tell these stories, but like, and especially to put them online, like, it's like to receive the connection of those things, like, because I know that I'm not the only one that's been through some of this crazy stuff. Like, maybe specifically, yes, but there's so many other crazy things that people have been through and stuff like that. And I think that like the ways that I've gone through these things can like is relatable to a lot of people who might struggle to find that relatability elsewhere in our society, you know. And maybe just because people don't like to talk about a lot of these things, or don't know how to. And like, especially when it comes to like affiliations with cults, or like different types of groups of, you know, gangs and stuff like that, and like people into some shady shit. Like, those aren't things you're supposed to talk about. And like, I think most people find themselves somehow affiliated, that they feel afraid to talk about those things. I was always afraid to talk about a lot of things just because I didn't want them to be able to take the small bits of abundance I had worked so hard for. But like, I kept quiet long enough that like I've been able to establish myself now, and I do actually have a firm foundation underneath me. So like, I don't have to be afraid anymore. You hear that? I'm not afraid anymore. But like, that was something that yeah, it took a long time. It took active cultivation of a lot of different things over a period of time. So I don't blame anybody for being in the positions that they're in to not want to talk about those things. But like, can I unlock this? Yeah, I just think a lot of people can't talk about those things or don't know how to talk about those things. And I think that it's important to get that stuff out so that people know that they're not alone and that they're not actually stuck and that they don't have to sell their souls, because that's a big thing in this society. And it's something that I hate to see and I don't want to continue seeing. And if I can do anything to keep people from feeling like they have to do that, by all means, like, that is what I would like to do. You know, I can't see any better use of my experiences than to help people to not go through those things. So, all that to say, just happy to be where I'm at. Very happy, and I'm very thankful. And I'm so thankful for my ancestors. Like, I've been, you know, close to them since 2020, since all of that kind of started, was when I started getting like close to my ancestors, and that has been everything. I mean, however people need to do that for themselves is likely different. But for me, like praying to my ancestors and stuff, like I think it all leads to the same sort of place, which is a truly knowing of oneself, as far as like an individual aspect is concerned. And I think that is everything for the individual. Like, we can learn together and looking out into the world about the world, but like, no matter how much you learn about the world, if you don't learn about yourself and truly know yourself, you're still always going to find yourself somewhat lost. When if you really can delve into like the person that you are and everything that makes you who you are, like, then you start to understand the world around you much better. It to me is essential in basically any sort of like anything, really in anything. I mean, because like, I dated an astrophysicist for a time who was so well educated. He had gone to school for 12 years to get his master's. Extremely intelligent, extremely well educated. So educated that like he couldn't process how somebody like me, who is mostly uneducated, could conceive these concepts that he had had to spend years in school to even begin to understand. But I could sit there and converse with him about different things, and obviously I wasn't coming from a point of being educated, so he would have to like give me the facts and details about things, but I could comprehend that. And that really blew his mind and really made him uncomfortable. He didn't like that because he had spent thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars and all of this time and energy to get where he was. And for me to be able to like at all relate to him being some poor ass that didn't go to school, barely finished high school, like, it really, he didn't like that. But at the same time, like, to me, that was, I mean, that's the downfall of education, is that you can become so well educated that you believe yourself to be intelligent when education is not teaching you intelligence. Intelligence is just coming innate with your capacity to be able to process your experience. And most people, like, you can become so educated that, like, you're just taking in information that's been given to you and able to process and project that. That doesn't mean that you've actually experienced anything at all. So there is no intelligence innately attached to it. And I think that can be extremely misleading, and especially in a society that like upholds education as superior, not to experience, but most people, like, we live in a pretty sheltered society. Like, most people really haven't experienced the things that education would speak on. So, like, you know, people expect a person to go to school and to learn about those things in order to teach on those things. And, like, there's something to be said of that as well. That in of itself is its own experience. I just think that there's a discrepancy that often gets misinterpreted, and then people, like, are left just, like, less capable than they believe themselves to be because of it, right? I mean, this dude's an astrophysicist. He's like, I'm a nobody. Like, there should be nothing that like I could trump him in, especially when it comes to intelligence, you would assume, but like that's not the way that it works. Which is really just to say that like your personal experience is extremely valid and extremely important, and your capacity to be able to express your personal experience is needed in the world. And so learning how to properly express yourself is necessary. And I would encourage anybody to know themselves so that they can properly express themselves, because the world needs your experience. It needs you. It needs what you've been through in order to become fully connected, you know? And we shouldn't be relying on a super quantum computer to access our DNA sequencing so that it can lay out all of those connections for us, because ultimately we're the ones creating those things and crafting those things. And if we're trusting, it's kind of like having kids and hoping that your kids do better than you were ever willing to do. Where it's like your kids might do better than you, but like if you expect them to do better than you were willing to do, you're not actually helping them, and you're certainly not helping yourself, and you're not really making the world a better place. You're kind of just putting your responsibility onto something you can create and then validating that because you created it, that's good enough. And I just don't think that's the way things work. This card had lipstick on it because of whenever I was doing this and had lipstick, and I had gotten it on my finger and gotten it on the card. So I took it out of the deck to clean it. It's the Moon card. And in what I'm talking about, it's kind of a reflection of like the ebbs and flows of things, and that there is an ultimate balance both externally and internally. That's what's so crazy about the moon, is because it affects the water. It affects gravity, right? And gravity affects the water. So like in the same way that the ocean is ebbing and flowing, and like the what's it called? The tide is raising and lowering. We as humans are made out of what, 60 to 70% water, and we also are affected by the moon that way. And it's not something I used to ever believe in until I became a caregiver and was dealing with people with Alzheimer's and dementia, because they're not always in a stable mental state. So they're not always grounded in their own, your sense of self, your identity will overcome or like overcompensate for lacks in your experience. It's just a natural thing that happens. But like when you're not fully stable in your sense of your own identity, you tend to be a lot more sensitive to your experience and to the like small changes in your experience. Where like if somebody is like sundowning and you move the furniture around, or you put on something different than you would ever put on the TV, or like somebody new is introduced into the group, like those things can set somebody off, like absolutely throw them like completely outside of themselves. And that's because their identity is already somewhat displaced, and they're clinging to what little bits of their identity they can, and it's feeling very wishy-washy, and like those different types of things disturb that small sense of stability that they have, that bit of grounding. And I noticed that like during the full moons, people that sundown get really weird. And I was like I thought it was fake. I didn't believe that was a real thing until I was a caregiver and I was working third shift for 2 years, and like 3 years that I worked third shift, and like, oh, it's definitely real. You can know when there's a full moon, like people start acting crazy and you'll be like, is it a full moon? Yeah, sure is. Sure is. And that's why everybody's acting all crazy for no reason. And then like certain people even specifically like will be triggered by those things, and you can be like, I know because this person's acting this way. I know what the moon phase is right now. So wild. But that really got me interested in moon phases. And then I considered that like, well, yeah, I mean, if the moon affects the tide and we're so much water, like, of course it's affecting us in those types of ways. And I think that's all natural. I think that we are innately tied to everything that's happening all the time. So like you know, the positioning of planets and stars and stuff like that, like, is significant and does impact us energetically. But so does, like, feng shui, like the way we have a room set up, the way that, like, certain, like, the hotel that I just stayed at had such a weird vibe. I don't know why. I don't know why, aside from the fact that I think it was just, like, the way it was built. Maybe it was built on, like, some sort of weird uneven ground or something, but, like, something about it was a fine stay. It was a fine stay. Everything was fine. Everything was, like, mostly clean and everything like that. Like, there wasn't any issues. It just had a weird vibe. Like, it wasn't like, and I didn't even feel particularly uncomfortable staying there. It was just like one of those things where, like, I'm sensitive to those things, and I do think that stuff is very real. I've experienced it. Like I said, like, growing up, our house wasn't messy, okay? But there would be, like, dog hair everywhere all the time. And there was not a flat surface that wasn't just covered in stuff. My mom just had so many things. And so, like, the walls were covered in, like, pictures of people and all these different random things, like crosses and works of art and, like, all of these different, like, things that have been given to her, like, stuff that we had made. Other people had made, stuff she had made. And, like, when I was little, I didn't recognize those things as chaotic. I always felt incredibly chaotic in that space. But that was also home, and that was all that I knew. And so there was a comfort there with those things. It wasn't until I spent enough time in a space that wasn't like that, where everything actually had, like, a very specific place to be, and everything, like, you knew where everything was when you needed it, and, like, you didn't have, like, a whole bunch of extra stuff going on, that I realized how impactful it is to be in a space that isn't super chaotic, and how, like, it is incredibly stabilizing. Like, my ADHD used to be out of control, and my depression and anxiety used to be out of control when I was in, like, it does, like, when I'm in spaces that my mom lives in, it drives me up a wall. But when I'm in spaces, like I said, like, even my ex was literally trying to kill me, meanwhile, like, I felt very comfortable in those spaces because of how disciplined he was with the way that he kept things. And I've found that multiple times. I've been in multiple places where, like, the people are extremely controlling to a toxic degree, but because they're so disciplined about the way they keep things, it ends up feeling more secure than, like, this space I grew up in. It's so wild the way that our minds work and the way that psychology works when it comes to those things and our identities and how we place it on those things, even subconsciously. But it's true. It's true. And I even learned that, like, in retail. I was actually a supervisor for merchandising, for merchandising when I was working at Ralph Lauren. I worked there for 8 years total. And, you know, Ralph Lauren pays people to come in and train the employees. And, like, everybody's getting paid to be, like, as professional as possible and to have, like, this high standard of appearance and brand knowledge and, you know, like, how to do different types of things, like how to fold things a certain way or how to measure people. I kind of forgot, but, like, I used to know how to measure people for suits and stuff like that really well, and, like, how to measure people for their clothing and how to, like, I never dressed myself well, but, like, I knew how to dress other people well. But, like, being the supervisor of merchandising, I also learned, like, the importance of, like, placing things in certain places in order to subconsciously, like, gear people's mentality towards different things. You don't, you know, you put something in the front of the store in order to get people thinking about it so that later on when they get to this certain place, like, they've already had that come to them, so now they're a little less, they're, like, more desensitized to it and more apt to, like, look at that thing and actually, like, be drawn to it. There's different types of things like that and stuff that I learned over the years that, to me, was, as far as sales and retail is concerned, was all extremely manipulative, and I didn't really agree with any of it, and that's why I kept leaving the job. I was like, I don't like this, and then I kept going back, though, because it was teaching me something. Those things are extremely important. Those things are, they're true. That's just how we work as humans. And, like, what's crazy is that, like, in 2024, one of the highest paying jobs is marketing, media, and it's all based on manipulation tactics, on the study of people's psychology and how to like essentially like trick people into doing what you want them to do, paying for what you want them to pay for, dressing the way you want them to dress, buying the things you want them to buy. The show Mad Men was largely about that psychology and like about the transition from normal media marketing to the subconscious manipulation of things, just based around money and how we get big business on top. And like, I don't know, those things are really wild, but definitely innate in this culture. And so I also think it's important to know those things, because then you'll also find how, like, I mean, they do it with politics, they do it with religion, they do it with, you know, the food that you eat, they do it with, you know, everything. If you are at all engaged in any sort of media, even unintentionally, like billboards in your area, or, you know, radio ads that you hear at work or whatever, like, we are naturally prone to being influenced. So like, it's important to know oneself, to keep oneself on guard, to be vigilant, to not be succumb to the constant brainwashing that we're under in this society, because it is constant. You actually don't even have to live somewhere where those things are going on, because if enough people in your area are involved in those things, you will still be affected by them. You'll hear them talking at the bar, or, you know, like in your church, or like the way that people dress and stuff like that will become just like the norm. I remember going to a concert with my brother and his wife, and it was in the summer, and it was in Wisconsin. And it was for this band that his wife loved, that I had never heard of before, but they were actually very cool. They all played a whole bunch of different instruments, and they would like trade off instruments and stuff like that in the middle of the show. It was very cool. But they were a popular band. Walk Off the Earth is the name of the band. They were real cool. I hadn't heard of them prior to seeing them live, and I think that made me like them more, to be honest. But the band that was opening for them was this band, Big World or something like that, I think they were called. And they're like this pop band that like their audience was like majority wise was like teeny boppers, like, you know, 14 through 16-year-olds kind of. And so we were there for the show to see Walk Off the Earth. And you could tell which people were there for that band, because like it's kind of like it's like a hippie band, I guess, and like you could tell like what people were like a little bit older and weren't all wearing the same clothing. But for this one specific band that opened up for them, that was this pop band, like their entire audience was filled with girls of the same age, all dressed in the exact same outfit. And I found that wild, because this was a show in Milwaukee where like these people are coming from all over different parts of Wisconsin in order to see this, and probably parts of Illinois in order to see this show. And potentially even other places, but like it was something that like had been geared towards girls of that age, that like this was what was in, this is the fad, and all of these girls were very fatty, and like they're wearing high-waisted short shorts and crop tops. I don't think I saw a single girl that wasn't wearing that, of a single girl of a certain age not wearing that outfit. Even like girls who it didn't necessarily fit their body style, because that's kind of the thing now. Even still, it's become like more acceptable, but at the time, this was the first time I'd really seen that as a style, and like everybody was wearing it. And I remember being like, and to them, you know, I remember being that age, and to them, like, they're feeling like they're fitting in, they're fitting the fad, they're doing what they're supposed to be doing, so it feels good. But I'm looking at it like it's so silly. Like, do you not see that not a single one of you is an individual? Like, not one of you actually chose what to wear today. You let the media tell you what to wear, and you just picked it. Like, it blew my mind, but it's not like I'm so far removed from that, or that any of us are truly so far removed from that. It might be a little more obvious in the younger generations, because it's like watching the Disney Channel, like it's so in your face, like certain things, but it's like kids don't get that. So like that's how they receive those things. We're like, just because it's more subtle for us, the older that we get, doesn't mean it's any less propaganda. And I think that's something that like we've seen with like the boomers, right? Like the boomer generation, where like they have like these strong opinions that they believe are their own, but like we can see where those things came from, and we can see how it's not benefiting anything. You know, holding to those things is actually just falling for a system. But they don't see it that way. And like, I'm sure that there's things in my life that are the exact same way, right? So like I try not to judge, but I do try to keep vigilant about those things as much as possible. And I do try to just be willing to be held accountable to those things, so that I'm not falling victim to the brainwashing. You know, I don't think it's wrong to happen to like things that everybody else happens to like. I don't think that that's the problem. I just think that it's very easy to think that you like things just because it's been validated for you that like that it's good for you to be that person, when like maybe those things actually aren't for you, or maybe like there's something more for you or something better for you, and you would miss it when you're too busy trying to appeal to the standard or the masses. Okay, that's a whole lot of random stuff. I haven't even gotten on with this reading. I'm just feeling a lot of ways. I'm feeling like open and clear, more so than I have in quite some time. It's very nice. Give me, yeah, is that 3? Yes. Okay, and okay, we'll do it like this then. Can I have clarifiers for the 2 on either end? Face down. I'm only going to take it if it's face down. I'm only going to take what's face down. Do not throw the entire deck at me. Give me a clarifier for the Emperor and for the 4 of Pentacles in the upright. Thank you. Clarifiers. Okay, clarifiers just for the Emperor. Are there any other clarifiers just for the Emperor? Once more, any other clarifiers for the Emperor? And clarifiers for the 4 of Pentacles. Okay, do not throw the whole deck at me. I'm only taking face down cards. I would like a couple, just 2 clarifiers for the 4 of Pentacles in this position. Thank you. One more. Clarifier for the 4 of Pentacles in this position. There's cards that want to come out, but it's got to be the right one. Only taking what is face down. Face down. Wonderful. Okay. face down. And I need just one card. One card face down, clarifier for the Four of Pentacles, please. Not taking any of these. I appreciate it, but one more time, otherwise we're just sticking to the one that we have. Face down, single card, clarifier for the Four of Pentacles upright in this position. The Lovers in the World came out twice, but in the face up, so I didn't take them. Let me see. Okay, so what I have here is the Emperor in the upright and the Four of Pentacles in the upright. In between them, coming on its side, the Magician. Have that in between them. And then my clarifying cards. I'm going to take these like this. The clarifiers for these two I have is these two, and then these are clarifications of those. I have a different setup every single time. I just do whatever the cards tell me to do. Okay. The Emperor. To know oneself. The knowing of oneself. Oneself once one is known. The position of sitting in confidence of knowing oneself, which truly the confidence that comes with knowing oneself is knowing that you can't ever really know anything. And once you know the ways that you aren't, then you can recognize the ways that you are. So it's not anything particularly definitive, and that's where one finds their confidence. Meanwhile, in opposition is the Four of Pentacles, which is that like one has a very set idea of the material aspects of oneself and how they determine one's value, and you're holding very close to those things. You know, the Emperor is sitting here with like, he doesn't really need anything. He's confident just as he is on his throne, where the Four of Pentacles, like, you can't even see the throne. He's just sitting on a chair, basically, and, like, he's holding on to these pentacles very closely. The Magician on its side, in between them, facing the Four of Pentacles with the wand, and then pointing down at the Emperor, denoting that it's supposed to be kind of a transfer of energy that way, but in the positive, that, like, because the Magician is also confident, and it's like you don't have to hold on to preconceived notions. I keep using that word. I used it in the last reading too. Preconceived notions of oneself in order to identify oneself. And there isn't, although you can be identified by external factors and external values, they aren't ultimately the thing that's actually going to bring you confidence in oneself. Because when you're clinging to those things, you look silly, like this guy. Like you're so caught up trying to hold on to these things, and like he has both feet down, he has his arms trying to wrap around this, like his crown is taken up, and so there is no room for movement or growth really in that position. And I would say that that's kind of what these are reflective of. There's the Six of Cups in the upright is the clarifier for the Four of Pentacles in the upright, but then the Eight of Swords in the upright is the clarifier for that. And that's that when you should be feeling that you're receiving all of the abundance of the universe because every aspect of yourself is covered with some sort of abundance, you actually feel blinded and bound because you can't determine anything outside of what it is that you actively have a hold of. You're so set on the things that you have that you can't reach out for anything greater than that. You have a belief of what it is that you're supposed to be given, and in clinging to that, you might have found it, and so you're clinging to that, but like there's no growth there. Where the balance, and like I will say that like the Magician in the middle is like a sign of balance because of the eternity ellipsis over their head. And it being on its side, it's 8, sign of cycles. It's also reflective in the shadow aspect in this way, where the clarifiers for the Emperor are the 7 of Swords in the upright and Justice in the reverse. And I would say that the concept there is like one can become so caught up in an assurance of self that they become greedy, or that they become, what's the word, like blind, like you have blinders on. Like all you see is your assurance of self, so much so that like you can't see opportunities at hand, or you become so greedy with an assurance of self that like you believe yourself to be in control of any opportunity at hand, when truly like an opportunity to take more than what you already have, or to possibly gain more than you already have, is a matter of truly knowing oneself. I think I got a little ahead of myself with it, really. Like I already understood kind of what was being conveyed, because Justice in the reverse is like, is greed. And arrogance is not the same thing as confidence. And it's very easy, like once one has like, kind of gained access to all these different types of confidences in oneself, to sit in one's own throne and feeling quite arrogant that there's no more growth to be had. But this is actually resonant, and I suppose this is just something that I continue to need to reflect on, because it's something that's been resonant in multiple readings now, that like there's never a point where you come to full assurance of everything, especially not reality, which is constantly changing and has so many different aspects attached to it that like you couldn't possibly be fully contented in reality, separate from contentment within one's own self. That's truly where contentment lies. That's where happiness lies. That's where true confidence lies. The second that confidence is based on these things that you have, that you believe give you value, you take away from what is truly confidence, and you cater to an arrogance, which is like, I wouldn't want to validate to somebody that believes themselves better than me for having a nicer car, that they're better than me because they have a nicer car. But if I've convinced myself that I am lesser than for not having a nice car, I'm validating that concept, whether I want to or not. I'm giving them power. So it's important to keep oneself balanced, to know what one is working with, and to know when to work with those aspects, and when to be able to sit back and say, I'm contented. There should always be a drive for growth, but never a demand. And it's hard because like I look at my plants who like these poor guys. I'm really hoping that they're slowly coming to it. I don't know. It got so hot in the car today that they are absolutely wilting. Like, especially this big guy. Like, he's just so tired. He's so tired. And I hate it. I'm not laughing. Like, it's terrible. I'm so sorry. They've been through so much. But this, like, the heat, like, wilts them. It's too much, right? And, like, I can't force. It's a waiting game. And it's a matter of communication of figuring out exactly what they need and what they don't need. I can't just continue watering them because I will overwater them. They aren't plants that require much water. I can't just suddenly make it cold to make up for the heat because that will shock them. Like, there's all these different factors that go into being a living being where, like, it just requires balance. And that takes time, and it takes patience, and it takes knowing oneself. I'm not a jade plant. I don't know what jade plants need. I haven't studied them. You know, there's people that, like, have actually put themselves into relationships with jade plants to know what they require to the degree of being able to educate others on that. And that's what I need to look into, because that's what my plants need. You know, all of these plants have different things. We can relate to things around us by allowing ourselves to put ourselves into other people's shoes. But, like, truly, we will never know what it's like to be another person in their shoes, because even if I were to put on your shoes, I'm still me in your shoes. I will never be you in your skin. And I will never be you in your skin having gone through everything that you've gone through that has allowed you to become who you are today to make the decisions that you do. So there always has to be some concept of, like, release, that I'm not in control and I won't know. And I have to be okay with that because that's part of the balance. You know, the Emperor doesn't know what's coming any more than anybody else does. He might have enough wisdom through experience to be able to accurately foretell certain things more than, you know, a prince would or more than a page would. But truly, he can't know anything more than anyone has the capacity to, which is very little in the individual aspect. Yet there is a confidence and an assurance that comes in the experience, and that comes in the willingness, the capacity to be able to release. Something I pointed out before is that, like, although the Emperor sits with his fine robes, he still has knight's boots on, like part of the armor of a knight, because he's always ready for battle, like always ready to go into battle at any point in time. And, like, that's also taken a time. It's probably not the most comfortable thing, but you learn to be comfortable in that because you have all of these other things that benefit you. And, like, ultimately, like, you know, what you have is far more comfortable than that small inconvenience. At a time, it might have been the most inconvenient and most uncomfortable thing to keep on these bits of armor. But learning what armor to keep on, what armor you can take off, what armor you don't really need, and then being able to engage with your surroundings in that sense, like, those things gain us a sense of freedom. And I think truly, like, freedom, like, means something different to every individual. You know, I think that we can fight for each other's freedoms in a vain sort of way that is actually even beneficial, but I don't think that we can, like, truly speak for the freedoms of another individual, because, like, random, but, like, I saw this argument online the other day where, this is so inappropriate, but, like, this girl had talked about how she had been with a guy whose fantasy was to always have sex with a girl while he was pushing her head in a toilet, which is awful. And that's all these other girls had to say was, like, that is the most degrading thing I've ever heard, and I can't believe you let this guy do that. That's insane. You're crazy. And they just judged the shit out of this girl. But, like, I actually admire it because I get it. Like, I myself have different definitions as to what is pleasure and what is truly degrading. I have a degradation kink, so, like, there's a bit of, like, I get it. Yes, the whole point is that it's degrading. And the fact is that, like, you're actually not being degraded if you're strong enough to not feel degraded by letting yourself do the things that are considered degrading. Obviously, there's all these different lines that go into that. But, like, that to me is kind of speaks on freedom in that way. Because, like, I don't want to be told that like this is what respect is, and this is how you respect yourself as a woman, and this is what's going to make you feel the strongest, when like that isn't true. In fact, you telling me what is going to make me feel anyway as a woman feels far more degrading than anything I could choose to do for myself. So like there's these lines of individualism, and I think that's the beauty of being an individual in the collective. And I think that's the importance of knowing oneself as an individual within the collective, is because each individual aspect, like what my eyes need to be healthy is not what my fingers need and what my nails need. And what my nails need is not what my hair needs necessarily. There's all these different things that they share. There's different things that would benefit all of those things. But like my kidneys and my gallbladder and like my skin and like my endocrine system and like my, like all of those things require different things in order, and like they work different ways and they look totally different, and like some of them are like completely separate from the other and you would never want them to interact, but like they are all working together into one healthy individual. And that is just a microcosmic metaphor for what is happening on the it's a macro on the larger scale, right? On the larger collective scale, which is that like we are all ourselves an individual aspect of the collective and require all of these variances of freedoms and disciplines in order to be our healthiest selves. And like it's no one person is truly the same in that way. Yet there are groups of people that work together for specific purposes, and the health of that group is determined on the health of the individual, and then the health of those groups is what determines the health of the collective as a whole. And we've kind of misguided ourselves in the society to like have such a universal concept of what health and happiness and stuff are, that we've sacrificed the individual in order to appeal to that concept. And I don't believe that concept is valid or truly what's healthy. I don't think it's long-term sustainable. I don't think that sacrificing the individual for anything is long-term sustainable, because everything is crafted out of the individual and then externally from there. I think the only thing that truly exists is the individual. I think that each and every person unto themselves is the only thing that they can perceive is themselves, and that everything is just a reflection of themselves in that way, and that is how we are all collectively the consciousness of God in that way. I know that's deep, and that's like a whole nother thing to get into. But what I see here, and like it's reflective of like a conversation that I was having today. But like what the individual requires like is determined by the individual themselves. Not that I get to say like, well, what I require is pizza and soda every night. Like it's not like that. Like my body will tell me what is good for me and what isn't. And like that may or may not be what is good for somebody else. And that's kind of what like directs our connections. Because there was another focal point of the conversation about like, I might find somebody just like me, another woman just like me, in so many of these different ways. Like for any way that I could possibly tell, be like, wow, this person's like, that's crazy. We're just like each other. But like, you can't have two of the same things in the same space either. Like we like, sometimes like things are meant to kind of combine and trade and exchange in a cyclical sort of fashion in order to benefit the growth of one another. But sometimes things can be so like that they end up actually damaging one another. And like, that's like, when we have a virus that's very closely related to our DNA, like the closer that a fungus or a virus or a parasite of any sort is related to us, the easier it is for it to prey on us. We're like, the closer a person may be, the easier it is for us to connect. So there's always a sort of dichotomy happening but like ultimately, like that's only in perception, because it's not really truly a dichotomy when we have all of these different individuals and variances within the collective. It's just that, like, to the person themselves, to each individual themselves, like the most that we can truly like comprehend at any given time, because we're third dimensional beings, is that dichotomy, is the dualism of those things. It's either this or it's that. It isn't truly, and like in the grandest scheme of things, it's actually everything. But that's why, again, it's important for the individual to know themselves, because only they are able to determine for themselves what is and what isn't in that regard. And that's it. Like, I don't want to encourage people to, you know, sell themselves to a concept or to a savior outside of themselves, you know, to something that is not ultimately sustainable. At the same time, I do want to encourage people to be willing to fully embrace anything outside of themselves that is drawing them closer to themselves and to their highest power. You know, like growing up Christian, I'm not a Christian now, but those concepts still continue to serve me, and they served me well while I was growing up. Where, like, you know, like learning the Tao, like this is something that continues to serve me, but like I really only got into it for a short period of time before I got what I needed out of it. And now, like, I have what I need so that when I, you know, access these different things, like they serve me well. Where there's somebody, you know, in the world who was raised with the Tao, that came out of that wanting to find something more, more standard and more disciplined, and they found themselves in Christianity, and now Christianity serves them the same way that the Tao serves me. Like, I don't think that those things are so fully definitive. I think that that's the importance of the individual having the freedom to learn themselves and to know themselves that way. You know, and I think, yeah, I just think that it's important for us to create spaces for ourselves where those things are possible, so that we're leaving space for others that can come along and resonate with that, to also have that space to find for themselves those things without the dictation of who it is that we are and what we're supposed to be. I don't think that it's helpful with somebody struggling with their identity to tell them, well, I know this is who you are. Like, if somebody has gender dysphoria so bad that they literally believe themselves to truly be internally something different than what they appear to be externally or physically are externally, I don't think that it's helpful to be like, no, this is what you are because of the external, and like you just got to figure yourself out and like match this external thing, because they're not, their issue isn't external, their issue is internal, and it's even deeper than internal. It's an internalization of their internal experience. So like, no, nothing outside of them is going to be able to bring them to a sense of clarity. And that's the issue with like people, you know, then going and getting surgery or taking hormones or getting plastic surgery to look a certain way, or like dressing a certain way in order to appear a certain way, or like hanging out with a certain group of people, or getting a certain kind of job, or having a certain type of partner. When we convince ourselves that having certain things externally is going to fix an internal issue, we are misguiding ourselves from what the issue is. And in fact, we're giving ourselves valid seeming excuses to not truly get to the core of the issue. And in my opinion, the core of the issue is always going to come down to the individual's personal perception of themselves and the world in which they exist. And until they can properly engage with that, they're always going to find themselves in unhealthy cycles of engagement. And I think that's natural. And so I also don't think that those things need to be damned, you know, or cursed or like judged. I think that people just need to be properly guided to themselves. And that isn't going to look like me being like, this is who you are, Stephen. It's going to be like me finding who I am and then being able to express what that experience and journey has looked like, so that those that resonate with me can pull from that themselves what is helpful to them. And I think that that's the best hope that we've got, at least for as much as I can tell. But of course, like, I'm just me. Who knows, you know? With that, I'm opening it to this page, and since this is the one that I'm ending on, this is the one I'm going to read. This is, I guess, what would you, if they're not proverbs, it's excerpt 40. The movement of the Tao consists in returning. The use of the Tao consists in softness. All things under heaven are born of the corporal. The corporal is born of the incorporeal. Of course, this is always how this goes. We will read 41 as well. When a wise scholar hears the Tao, he practices it diligently. When a mediocre scholar hears the Tao, he wavers between belief and unbelief. When a worthless scholar hears the Tao, he laughs boisterously at it. But if such a one does not laugh at it, the Tao would not be the Tao. The wise men of old have truly said, the bright way looks dim, the progressive way looks retrograde. The smooth way looks rugged, high virtue looks like an abyss, great whiteness looks spotted, abundant virtue looks deficient, established virtue looks shabby, solid virtue looks as though melted, great squareness has no corners, great talents ripen late, great sound is silent, great form is shapeless. The Tao is hidden and nameless, yet it alone knows how to render help and to fulfill. Dude, the Tao is so great. But it's true. And the Tao isn't like some religion. Like, it's literally just a way to explain what it is that we're already experiencing, which is that dichotomy of experience that is personal versus a universal experience, and perception that is personal versus the perception of the collective. And like I said, that's just the state of being a third dimensional being. So like, nothing is so definitive. That's kind of the point, is to like move away from the sense of definitiveness in order to truly be willing to receive what is true to the individual. And if it really is an aspect of the universal truth, it will prove itself within the individual without having to be proven. That seems solid. Go get yourself some matcha. I got this from Juiceland, and it is top notch. Okay. All right, that's what I got. Thanks. Great time.